I can't really think of a club where the disparity between the fans, the owner, the manager was worse. Honestly, when you think about the way that Newcastle fans felt towards Steve Bruce, I'm not sure if I can think of an example that has been more stale than that one. Like, Newcastle fans would have literally swapped their manager with anybody.
They will now.
Whereas now, this is why it's such a breath of fresh air, and I think that's why it's been. Like, I saw a poll. I think the Newcastle United Supporters Trust ran a poll. I think it was 95% supportive of this takeover. Like, that's uncharted territory. I think, any takeover of any club,
there's always a bit of backlash.
There's usually some
pushback.
Exactly. Whereas 95% is about as unanimous for.
It didn't. From everyone looking out, we'll all agree, it didn't look like Mike Ashley cared. Okay, may have left the club financially stable, of course, but he didn't seem to care about the supporters. Didn't care about the football or the football club. So it was a business for him. I think the new owners coming in, it looks like it's not going to be that. It looks like it's going to be similar to a Chelsea, where I think Roman is one of the only ones to be losing money, just loving the club, just loving winning.
Lose money. I think you can lose money, but in terms of caring, I think that's an interesting word, because I don't know why anybody would think that the Saudis who are taking over and the PIF group that are now taking charge of Newcastle, they don't have this like lifelong bond with Newcastle United.
No.
This is being done for presumably business reasons, in the way that Mike Ashley bought the club for business.
Yeah, agreed. But it's taken a long time, and they could have quite easily backed out. They could have quite easily gone to another club. I mean, they're rich enough, they could have taken over almost any club.
Every club.
Yeah, exactly. And they've taken their time. They've been set back, been knocked back, and they keep coming back to Newcastle. So I think on that side, the supporters can look and think, well, they probably care. They do. And I see a banner. I was sent an image of a banner that the supporters were holding up, and it read, "We don't demand a team that wins, we demand a club that tries." And I mean, that just about sums it up, what it's like up there. And I think nothing's off limits with them at the moment, and they're going to enjoy the ride for the next few years at least.
Well, listen, they're certainly going to have to. So probably a conversation that will be for another day, is that there is a whole human rights element to the Saudi takeover, but obviously for today we're going to keep it strictly on field in terms of the manager and the players that they could bring in. But obviously that's no less important of a discussion that we should have at some stage. But when you start looking at players that are going to come in, managers that are going to come in, I mean, and listen, it is probably unfair to talk about managers coming in because Steve Bruce is still there, but you look in terms of what's happened in the last couple of big takeovers. So obviously Abramovich takes charge of Chelsea 2003. Chelsea win the league in 2 years. I think Ranieri lasted 335 days. Obviously, Sheikh Mansour takes over at Manchester City 2008. It takes them 4 years to win the league. Mark Hughes lasts 503 days.
So and then two managers that got on well with the support with the fan base.
Exactly. So you tend to not last long when you get a new kind of financial backing, certainly of a powerhouse like these are. So what kind of names are we looking at potentially then that are going to come in as the club is it now and make immediate change? Go on, Rory.
I think it's very difficult. I think it's effectively, this is a stab in the dark, isn't it? We're throwing names out there because we don't know. But when you think about the way that this Saudi takeover has happened, when you think about the way that they are talking and the way that they are leading us to believe they will approach the game, I think a statement, a name, the glitz, the glamour, somebody who has a huge heritage in Premier League football. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the likes of Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard mentioned around this job.
But has Frank Lampard done enough? And will that excite the Newcastle fans in terms that could Frank Lampard, and listen, I'm no disrespect to Frank in terms of what he's done on the pitch, because we know he's a Premier League legend, he's a Chelsea legend, arguably the greatest player in their history, you'd have to say, arguably.
Agreed.
But could he as a manager attract the likes of, say for instance, a Coutinho?
I think he certainly could attract, and also I think the other thing that we kind of forget, because this is such a dazzling moment for Newcastle United, I think the thing that we have to remember for today, Newcastle United are in a relegation battle.
Exactly, yeah.
We have to remember that Newcastle United, as of today, look, I think they will win the Champions League in the near future. I genuinely do. I think that this is going to happen, but I also think that they've got to take it each step at a time. And the step today is to find somebody who will guarantee you Premier League survival and do it with a little bit of panache, do it with a little bit of glamour. I think Frank Lampard probably ticks both of those boxes. And when you look at what Frank Lampard achieved with Chelsea, I feel like history has been quite unkind to him. I think history has been very unkind, in fact, to the way that Frank Lampard conducted himself at Chelsea. Navigated the club through a transfer ban, took the club to, fourth in the league, the last 16 of the Champions League and the FA Cup final. that's not bad for your first season managing in the Premier League. Oh, ultimately it went a bit wrong, and we can have the debate as to why. But in terms of if you're looking at that CV and you're in a position of power at Newcastle United, I think there is an element of appeal to that.
Do you think Lampard? Would you take Lampard over someone like Eddie Howe?
I think I would. Yes, I think I would.
Is that on name alone, or because if you look at terms of CV, there's a big difference there.
There's a massive difference there. I think whoever it may be is probably not going to last that long, in my opinion. I think it's going to be a stopgap before one of the big guns come available. We look at Roberto Mancini potentially after the World Cup. He won't change until after that. So I think whoever it may be, I mean, and I've heard a few people heard a few supporters talking about Alan Shearer maybe. And I think just giving him an opportunity to go back.
It didn't work out well the last time.
It didn't, but listen, that wasn't his fault, of course. He was brought in. It was a hard task for him to get survival. Whether he would want it, he's got a cushy job at the moment, isn't he? Talking about football. So whether he would want that, but I think to make a statement in the city, there's no one better to say, right, we're going to put the main man in charge. Got a statue outside the stadium.
Do you think they could skip a step? In as much as, how we're saying that there'll be effectively an interim, somebody who will navigate the club away from the relegation battle and maybe talk about the Europa League, and then potentially bring in somebody that will aim for the very top. Do you think they potentially miss out the first step and just go for the heavyweight? For example, just go for Antonio Conte.
I mean, it's a tough question to answer, because they would want to. I think they would want to immediately, but then you look at the players as well. Do you miss the steps of the not the world class players, but the step below that, bringing all them in, or do you just go straight for the top Haaland, Kanes, people like that? That, I mean, they can afford it, but it might be a case of a stopgap survival this season, a good January transfer window, and see where it takes you come the summer.